Delegate. Oh, okay. Delegate Landis has House Bill 1393, and Delegate Landis has asked that we strike his Bill 1393. Do I have a motion to do that? All right, all those in favor of striking 1393, say aye. Opposed? That bill is stricken. Delegate Farrell.
Yes, sir.
You ready?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to go down
House Bill 1571.
Mr. Chairman, this is a continuation of the workers' comp bill we passed last year. The group of stakeholders have actually worked really hard and really well together for last year, and this bill provides, they needed some technical cleanup and some clarification to the current language of the bill, because quite frankly, it's easy for all of us to understand what we meant and what we're doing, but in 10 years we wanted to make sure people still understood what we were doing. So this bill cleans up some definitions. It doesn't change the substance of what we did last year. I would say it's a cleanup in technical nature. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I think we have some amendments to your bill.
And we have one amendment, yes, sir.
One amendment. Frank, if you could report the amendment, and our page could help them hand those out in just 1 second, please, if you could do that.
Mr. Chairman, actually there are two amendments. The first amendment is on page 2 at line 67. We're inserting a new definition of new type of technology. Means an item resulting or derived from an advance in medical technology, including an implantable medical device or an item of medical equipment that is supplied by a third party, provided the item has been cleared or approved by the Federal Food and Drug Administration, FDA, after the transition date and prior to the date of the provision of the medical service using the item. And Mr. Chairman, the second amendment is similar to this, mostly strikes that same language from page 3 at line 173. After new type of technology, strike the phrase including an implantable medical device or item of medical equipment that is supplied by a third party, provided that such technology has been cleared or approved by the Federal Food and Drug Administration, FDA, prior to the date of the provision of the medical service.
All right, you've heard the amendment. Anybody on the committee have a question or comment about the line amendment? Anybody in the audience wish to be heard for or against the line amendment? Do I have a motion on the line amendments? Have a motion and a second on the amendments as a group. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those are carried. Adopted. All right. Delegate Farrell.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just the last amendment was the last clarification we needed, just to how to handle what is new technology going forward. And with that, I will ask the committee to look favorably upon the bill, and I'm happy to answer any more questions.
Delegate Farrell, thank you for your hard work on this workers' compensation fee. The fee schedule. I know that it's been a trying time for you, but everyone I've talked to has complimented your tenacity on this issue, so we really appreciate you working hard on this. Anybody in the audience wish to be heard for or against House Bill 1571 as amended?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
could we hear from members
Yes.
their thoughts on these amendments?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Academic Scott Johnson, and General Counsel of the Medical Society. I'm one of the members on the advisory panel that's worked on this. The panel is in agreement with these changes. We ask you to support them, and I'm glad to answer any questions.
All right. Anyone have any questions of Mr. Johnson?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just a question.
Yes.
Can you sort of walk through the changes and where they're, if there any of them are maybe viewed as more substantive than others, just that we need to be aware of? A lot of work was put into last year's version.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, on page 1, line 28, we based the fee schedule on various names and types of codes, and we left off at the end revenue codes. And revenue codes, if you flip to line 79, are defined. Basically, it's a hospital coding vehicle that lets you define where the service is delivered in what department. If you go back to line 36, another type of coding is often referred to as Hicks-Picks coding. And Hicks-Picks coding not only has numbers, but also has various alphabetical codings, like J codes and A codes and B codes. So we needed to clarify that all of those subsets are included in there. On the bottom of the first page of line 57 and 58, we had talked about that burns and trauma are going to be treated differently, and we talked about when a hospital bills for burns and trauma, it's a facility billing number, but we had forgotten to include anything about the professional fee, meaning the doctors billing for their care of burn and trauma patients. So we clarified that on lines 57 and 58 for the burns, and on lines 59 and 60, we clarified it for the trauma. On lines 69 and 71 of the bill, because we made a reference to professional services, that needed to be a defined term. We created a definition for that in the bill. If you then turn over to page 4, the advisory committee, the 10-member advisory committee that we were working on the fee schedule, we expanded our call to say whatever the workers' compensation commissioners need of us, we stand willing and able to serve on these matters on a go-forward basis on that. Page 4, line 215. One of the things you put in the bill last year is you always hope a hospital admission is pretty straightforward. You get the claimant healed, you get them back to work. But sometimes you get thrown a medical curveball and the person needs additional medical care. And so a fee schedule may not be enough to compensate for that curveball, so we created an outlier. And we put some percentages in the code, and basically the short answer is we got it wrong. So in working with the actuaries that have been advising us, we needed to change on line 215, one number there, 217 another number, and allow us to adjust. Mr. Chairman, on page 5, the advisory committee was charged in a fourth enactment clause last year to do certain work, and we're not going to be able to complete that by this July. We needed one more year, and the last line of the bill is an emergency clause because we'd like to move us along so we can get our work done on time.
And Mr. Chair, if I may follow up on the calendar, moving the calendar, like he just said, that actually doesn't have to do with the main meat of last year, which was the fee schedule itself. But if you recall last year, we asked them to look at other issues having to do with workers' comp, and that's why the calendar extension is needed, not because of the fee schedule itself. And I think it's just an important clarification.
All right. Does that answer our question?
Another question?
Sure.
Can you sort of walk us through from here to the finish line what other steps need to be done till we have a final implementable product that we'll begin to see the effects of?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. So back in the spring, the commissioners called together our advisory. We interviewed and put out an RFP for actuarial firms.
When you say commissioners,
Workers' compensation commissioners. Commissioner Marshall, who's here.
Right, I see.
And Oliver Wyman was the actuary that was selected. Began working with Oliver Wyman. First thing you had to do was figure out what claims data you were going to use to build our Virginia-specific fee schedule. And they reached out to NCCI, who has the paid claims data. We also reached out to providers and had providers submit their data. This week we have received, in essence, the initial draft fee schedule, and we hope to be just days away from being able to release that to the public. The public then will have 6 weeks or so to give feedback, and remember, it's intended to be revenue neutral, but there are going to be some people that get paid a little bit more, a little bit less, some get paid the same, but we want the providers to test that and get that information back. Then there will be official public hearings that the commission will conduct for additional feedback. Then the fee schedule would be passed in the fall of this year and will be operational, as you said, for January 1, 2018.
I think that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
All right, anyone else have any questions? Thanks for your all's hard work too, Scott.
It's been a team effort. The commission has done great, commission staff, the actuary has done great, and I'm humbled to serve with my fellow advisors. John Hurd and others are here that work with us on that.
Okay. All right, thank you. Now do we have a motion on the bill?
Move the report.
As amended? As amended.
Move the report as amended.
All right. Do you have a second? All right, have a motion and a second. Now, you know you vote on these newfangled gizmos here. Yes. You only press it, you only have to press, you're only supposed to have to press it one time. So you don't have to just keep, you don't have to keep hitting it, so. All right, let's see if it works. Everybody wishing to vote, vote on electronic voting board. Yeah, mine works. Oh. All right, is everybody voted that's here and wants to vote? All right, clerk will close the rolls. House Bill 1571 report to the amendment 16 to 0. Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
do you need a motion? I think we were gonna have my bill go by the next meeting. Do you need a motion on that, or can you just do that?
I do, House Bill 1659 will go by till next Tuesday, did we say Tuesday? And, you know, if there's some work that needs to be done on this bill, get it done between now and next Tuesday, okay? Delegate Ware.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to call on Delegate Nixon to present this bill. No, not seriously. Good to see our old friend Sam back with us. And this is House Bill 1471.
Right. What are you trying to do?
What I'm trying to do, actually,
I'm trying to change hundreds of years of state law. Why?
the reason for this momentous piece of legislation, Mr. Chairman, is this. The Bureau of Insurance and I reviewed things, and we decided that it was time for a change after these centuries.
Okay.
And so, at their request, I've got a bill that deals with reinsurance credits. It adopts a nationwide credit for reinsurance model law that the National Association of Insurance Commissioners have promulgated. The measure has been shared with the industry in the fall, and we're not aware of any opposition from that. In brief, what it provides is that the Commission can specify additional requirements relating to or setting forth the valuation of assets or reserve credits, the amount and forms of security supporting certain reinsurance arrangements, and the circumstances under which credits will be reduced or eliminated. That's in summary form what the bill
And this
provides.
is a Bureau of Insurance bill.
It is a Bureau bill, and they are prepared to give you further information if necessary.
All right, anyone have any questions for the patron or for your Bureau of Insurance? All right, any operates on that motion? Second. Have a motion and a second to report. Anybody else in the audience wish to be heard for or against? Members wishing to vote, vote on your electronic voting device. All right. All right, House Bill 14, clerk will close the roll. House Bill 1471 passes 18 to 0.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members.
All right, and the last bill that we have today is House Bill 1394. I believe we dealt with this last year, didn't we?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Although we do have an amendment, I think that the clerk has for this one as well.
Mr. Chairman, the amendment's on page 1, line 26, after franchisee, at the beginning of the sentence, insert the word or franchisor.
Have a motion and a second to adopt that amendment. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? 2 to 0, it passes. All right.
All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this is, aside from that small change, the same bill that we saw last year and that passed out of both House and Senate.
So let him need to go through it.
So what this seeks to do is simply clarify that franchisees and franchisors are separate entities one from another. A franchisee, by definition, purchases a right to operate an independent business under a model that is provided by a franchisor, generally in exchange for an initial franchise fee and then an ongoing royalty. But beyond that, that's where the relationship ends. And a franchisor may be able to, in exchange for using a name and granting of a license, also might be able to maintain some specific standards that have to be operated under, but those standards do not include employment. And the franchisees are all independent businesses and wish to make certain that they remain independent businesses. And so what this, from the standpoint of employment, says is that franchisees' employees are not to be considered employees of the franchisor. There's not a co-employer relationship there. They are independent one from another. That really strengthens the small business. That strengthens the protections that individual workers have by allowing them to maintain their independence on that. This legislation has passed in some form in Tennessee, Texas, Louisiana, Michigan, Wisconsin, Indiana, Georgia, Utah, and Oklahoma, and this year is up before us: South Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, Arizona, Nebraska, Mississippi, Missouri, South Carolina, and New Hampshire. So obviously there's a lot of movement around the country to make certain that this is codified, and Virginia ought to join in.
All right. Do you have anybody to speak, that you wish to speak in favor of the bill?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Kate Baker on behalf of the Virginia Retail Federation, and we support this bill and actually have a member here with us to speak on behalf of it.
Delegate Senator McClellan, the question you want to, you're trying to vote on this on both sides, aren't you? Now, what, okay, you have a question?
I guess this is for the patron. As I recall, this bill last year was vetoed by the governor. Do you recall why?
I do, actually. The governor made reference in his justification for the veto that there would exist a de facto co-employer relationship in the case of a dominant franchisor. The problem with that is that, first of all, that is just simply factually inaccurate. Secondly, there's no such thing as a dominant franchisor. That was a made-up term. I don't know where the governor got it or what was running through his mind when he did, but no such term exists anywhere in any regulation or in any law that any of us have been able to find, and nor were we able to get any explanation of that from the governor's office.
Follow-up, Mr. Chair. Follow-up question, Mr. Chair. Have you had any discussions with the administration or the Secretary of Commerce and Trade to see if they have a position on the bill this year?
I think you'll be hearing from somebody from the administration here shortly.
Okay, thank you.
All right, yes, ma'am, sorry. Go ahead. That's your name, and who you represent.
Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in front of you this afternoon. My name is Lori Yanka. I'm a resident of New Kent County, and I own and operate 3 independent retail franchises. 2 of those are located in Newport News, and 1 of those is located in Mechanicsville. So I hope everybody from my districts heard which part of me you represent. I'm speaking to you today in support of HB 1394 and asking you to support it as well. I was able to pursue my dream of owning my own business 7 years ago. If you think back with me, 7 years ago, it was 2010. 2010 was not a good economy, and it was certainly not a good economy for anyone wanting to start up their own small business. I decided to franchise as a way to own and operate my own independent business while mitigating some of the risks of business startup. From my franchisor, I was able to buy a computer system, a logo, and some operational instructions, none of which I am bound to follow, with the exception of the computer system. I liked the idea of not starting completely from scratch, so I put everything I had into buying and starting my own business. Once my franchise agreement was signed, I was on my own. All responsibility for financing was mine. All responsibility for ongoing capitalization is mine. If my business runs into trouble, the franchise assumes and has no risk in what happens as an outcome of my business and its operation. I receive no help and certainly no support from them when it comes to financial risk. I am the one who took my life savings and signed personal guarantees on 3 small business loans and 3 business leases. While my franchisor certainly wants me to be successful, if something goes wrong, I am on my own utterly and completely. And I want to be clear about what that means. I will lose everything, my life savings and my house. Now, I certainly didn't go into business because I wanted to or expected to fail. And I know I have to run my business in a way that I can get, train, and retain the best talent. And I've put a lot of time and energy into this. Without HB 1394, there is a real risk that I will lose control of the businesses I have financed and I have built, and especially of the teams that I have recruited, hired, trained, and continue to develop. Since I know that my team members are the lifeblood of my business, I invest a lot in them. Compared to state and national averages, my average hourly wage is higher. Compared to state and national averages, the salary of my managers is higher than my industry. I offer a generous paid time off policy to my employees, which is not usual for my industry. And I invest more in training and development dollars on average at the state level or the national level for my industry. I also provide several other employment and profit sharing policies that exceed national averages for retail. I do this because I think it's the right thing to do and because I have the ability to make that decision for my business. Without HB 1394, I stand a real chance of losing the ability to make all of those decisions. I'm asking you to support HB 1394 because I am fearful that my businesses are at risk. If my franchisors become responsible for the employment decisions of their independent franchisees, you can be fairly certain the first thing they will change at my renewal is that I will no longer be independent. I feel I've worked too hard and risked too much to lose control of my businesses. If I had thought that one day my franchisor would take away my ability to make my own decisions and to run my business in the best way I deem possible, I probably would not have put everything on the line for this. And I'm certainly not looking to grow or expand any businesses in Virginia without this protection. I'm asking you to protect me and the 22,000 other franchisees in Virginia so that we retain control of the independent businesses we have financed and we have built. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any more in support?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Nicole Brownlee with the National Federation of Independent Business. We have a good number of our members who are franchisee owners and consider themselves independent business owners. And as voiced earlier, we believe this bill would help protect what is the current practice between them, the relationship between them and the franchise, and making sure that they can retain the ability to hire and fire as they choose. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I'm Mr. Chairman, Ryan Dunn with the Virginia Chamber of Commerce. We also support this bill. This bill we think will go a long way in actually defining that relationship in Virginia and making us look that much more competitive. Thank you.
All right, anyone against the bill, if you could come forward, please.
My name is Robert Field. I'm with the Virginia Department of Labor and Industry, and the governor remains opposed to the bill. The reasons are not that there is a term of art about dominant franchisor, but if a franchisor in some situations imposed his will upon a franchisee such that it had to the detriment of the safety or health of the employees or the payment of wage situations they had, it might be impacted in Virginia. We think that the bill goes too far, and what we need to have is the ability to look at the situation so that if there is a franchisor who is overriding the wishes of the franchisee in those particular areas where Virginia law would control the situation, that it ought to be left to that decision to look at the facts of the case and determine if the franchisor is actually overriding what the franchisee would have to do, so that if they were making some kind of decision that would lead to safety violations, it should not be up to the franchisee if the franchisor was the person who put their control, took some kind of extra authority.
I think there's a Delegate Marshall has a question.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. Sir, do you know of any circumstances where a franchisee, your issue is, has that happened, or can you name an instance that has happened?
We have had situations where we have looked into it, where there was somebody said their franchisor made them do it. We did not find that information to be enough to look to the franchisor, but we have the ability to do that in a safety situation where they said the franchisor told them what they should do as to
not really sure why, yeah.
I am motion.
Yeah, I understand, but so, I mean, the building's not safe, it's not safe. I mean, somebody's gonna have to change it. You know, whoever owns the building is gonna have to change it.
Well, it was the safety situation we were looking at, is one where they said that the franchisee told them not to do whatever the action was. It was not their own choice.
Right, but.
And so we looked at the situation, and there might be a situation where, for instance, there's painting franchise, for instance, where the painting franchisor says, don't use that ladder, it makes our jobs run too slowly, and that ladder is the safest one to use, or the one that they should have used. And they can blame it on the franchisor. We would not be able to go and say, well, you're right, the franchisor told you to do that. They should be the one responsible, not the franchisee in that situation.
But Mr. Chairman, if I
Yes.
may, but that really becomes about the owner of the business, not about, I mean, I understand you're still gonna be able to get at the issue. I mean, just because one's not classified as the paint corporation's employee, I mean, you're still gonna be able to do your job. I mean, you haven't really told me why that keeps you from being able to do your job,
Well, we would address the safety and health of the employees.
which is really OSHA's job, correct?
That is our job.
Correct.
But if the reason for that violation is one where the franchisor was doing it, the franchisee would have taken the action to put up the proper ladder. But the franchisor told them not to.
But Mr. Chairman,
then
so you're
franchisor-
saying if this law passes, you seem to say that you have no way to deal with this situation. Is that true?
Well, we would still look at the franchisee.
And
But the
take care of the
franchisor
same,
Franchise and protect the safety of the employee.
right, which is your job.
That is our job. But the franchisor who caused the problem in this situation would be able to get away with imposing extra liability on their franchise.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
maybe this is for the patron. I assume there usually is some leeway in regards to how state law affects your franchisee when you sign a contract. I mean, I imagine the franchisee has a way to communicate to the franchisor that this would be a violation of my state.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that is exactly what happens. If a franchisor imposes something that is in violation of state law or federal law, then it's the responsibility of the franchisee to follow state and federal law. As a matter of fact, I believe that federal statutes mandate that in franchise relationships that is delineated in the franchise agreement. I've never seen a franchise agreement that it wasn't delineated in, and we're dealing with an area of industry that has a significant amount of restriction placed on what franchisors can and cannot do, and the leeway. For example, a McDonald's, all McDonald's pretty much will buy their meat patties from the same vendor, but they're not required to do so. If they choose to go with someone else, all they have to do is make sure that the specifications for that patty, as far as size, shape, fat content, whatever, is going to be the same, and they specify it down to a level to where it becomes much more cost effective to buy it from the preferred vendor. But they're not required to do so. The situation, again, the situation that's been laid out there by the administration simply doesn't happen. And I've never been given a situation, even in the case very abstractly presented to you today, without any specifics given, said, and we looked into it and we didn't find that there was anything there. So if there's nothing there, then why have a problem and see something there?
I think Doug would be good.
I do a question for Mr. Fields, and I appreciate you being here. So you're familiar with 16 CFR 436.1, I'm sure.
No.
So that's the CFR that defines franchisee and franchisor for federal law and the Federal Franchise Act. So the reason that's important for you to know what that means, and so then I'll try to clarify the questions. Under the Franchise Act and under the CFRs enacting the Franchise Act, if a franchisor exerts control, I think your words were impose their will, they actually cease to be a franchisor under the Federal Act. You agree with that, right?
Having not read the act, I can't say. But
Okay, well see,
as presented, I would agree if that's
okay,
what
well this is the problem, and so I'm going to try to put a question mark at the end of what may not start as a question. This is the problem with the governor's position last year, because the governor, by creating the term dominant franchisor, created a legal fallacy that can't exist. Because if a franchisor is dominant, they cease to be a franchisor under federal law. They can't qualify as a franchisor, which means they can't qualify as a franchisor under this statute, which means they wouldn't get the benefit of this statute. And so I guess what we need the administration to do, because my assumption is this bill will continue to go forward, we need you to actually read the federal law that defines franchisor and franchisee, which is incorporated into this statute as fundamental to this statute. Because when you read it, you'll see that an imposition of will by a franchisor would invalidate the protections of this statute. And so the very protection the governor's looking for is built into this. And so once the administration reads the governing federal law, I think you'll actually realize this statute does exactly what you want to do, which in that very rare circumstance where a franchisor goes too far and imposes its will, it will cease to be a franchisor benefiting from this statute. Question mark. Thanks.
All right. I don't know. But anyway, next, opposition. Yes, ma'am. Come forward. Please give us your name, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Julia Newton. I'm with SEIU for 8512. And we oppose the bill because it threatens workplace safety.
Thank you. Next.
Good afternoon, Julie Emery with the Virginia Civic Engagement Table. For the reasons previously mentioned, we would also oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Doris Krause-Mays, President of the Virginia AFL-CIO, and we oppose the bill as well. Let me just say that all franchisee relationships are different. Therefore, the courts and the agencies evaluate the actual nature of each franchise relationship to assess the level of operational control by the franchisor. Relevant factors include power of the franchisor to hire and fire, supervise or control work schedules and conditions of employment, determine the rate and method of pay, and management employment records. If a franchisor calls all of the shots in terms of hiring and firing, safety and working conditions, why should we be prevented from holding the franchisor responsible as an employer? Thank you.
All right, anybody else wish to speak in opposition? All right, Delegate Head, you have the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One final thing I would say. First of all, addressing that last comment, if a franchisor exerts hiring and firing control, exerts all of the things that are there, they are no longer a franchisor, and that doesn't exist in any franchise situation anywhere at all in the United States. One final thing that I would hold up for you as an example of why this is important. The more we seek to weaken the franchisee as an independent business person, the more we seek to add extra burden on franchisees, the more we limit the ability of the franchisees to hire people and give people jobs. And one of the things that happens with that is automation. You end up finding ways to not have to utilize people, but you utilize machines because it's cheaper, easier, and is much less of a regulatory barrier. I've got a picture here that I took of a McDonald's restaurant. This one happened to be in Montreal, but I was there this past fall. And if you can see, and I'll be glad to show it to you later, but what you're seeing here is a bunch of kiosks out in the lobby. This McDonald's doesn't have cashiers anymore. You walk in, you stand up to a kiosk, you punch in your order, you feed in your money, you use your Apple Watch to pay, or you use a credit card, and you get a ticket back from that, and then the one employee behind the counter picks up the completed order and calls out a number. This technology was put into place because regulatory barriers made it too expensive to continue to hire people. If we continue to muddy the water and overly control independent businesses, this is what's going to happen. And the people that are concerned about the worker are going to have no workers to be concerned about. So I would just ask you to please pass the bill forward. Thank you.
All right. Committee's heard have a motion and second to report the bill as amended. Members wishing to vote on the electronic voting board. 1994 reports with Amendment 1427. Thank you, Dr. Head. I think that is all that we have. Do we have a subcommittee meeting on next Tuesday, or? No? Okay. I don't think so. All right, the first subcommittee was Delegate Hugo. You will meet the first one is Subcommittee 1, Delegate Byron, 119, next Thursday, and then you 124.